And welcome to Sinclair. My name is Jim Ellermeyer, and today I'm joined by two of my colleagues.
Mike Sorg, Web Director here at Sinclair.
And?
Loren, I'm a PA student from the University of Mount Union.
And for those of you who may not know that hand side, we are not members of a gang. However, could you explain that, Mike?
Oh, maybe a little of an intergalactic gang. That is the hand sign for Live Long and Prosper, made famous by, of course, Spock, played famously by Leonard Nimoy and other more recently Zachary Quinto, I guess, in the new series, and part of the Vulcan culture. And it was kind of their greeting and parting, and it was really kind of the universal sign of Spock in Star Trek a bit.
And for those of you who may be viewing for the first time, every week at Sinclair on Mondays we send out live on a topic that may be of interest, we hope, and something that you can put into your everyday life. And we also like to add a nice, good dose and sense of humor too. We do that, Miss Loren. So today, Mr. Mike, what are we going to discuss?
Well, of course, over this past weekend, actually Friday, I guess, there was the passing of Leonard Nimoy, as we mentioned, who, again, played Spock. For me, I also seen in other roles. He was on Mission Impossible for a time. He's actually voiced a character in one of my favorites, the Transformers movie from 1985, and actually more recently, one of the new ones, too. But he passed just Friday, apparently from a disease, from the smoking that was 3 decades earlier, he's kind of a character for a lot of people. His presentation on screen that I think kind of impacted a lot of our upbringings. A lot of us grew up on the original Star Trek, if not several of its iterations, and he had a big hand in kind of developing that character. And I think it's really interesting because the character of Spock is this part Vulcan, part human hybrid, and from a culture that really values logic, and then really kind of dealing with his humanity and emotion and trying to cut that out and what happens with that. And a lot of his story and a lot of the movies are about that struggle that he has internally, which I think reflects a lot of the struggle that people have, that we talk about here, about dealing with our emotions, what we do with that with Sinclair.
Absolutely. And as you may have guessed or may not know, Miss Loren, I was born before yesterday, and I watched the series as it came on, and what they did was using futuristic situations as analogies for current problems that happen on a day. And we have to remember back at that time, back in the 1960s, it was a time of flux and evolution in American society. We had what's so-called the hippies, and yet we so-called had the ultra-conservative movement that dominated Middle America. And for those of you who may not know anything about the original situation, it was one of the first shows that had a mixed cast. And also Mr. Spock was of mixed origins himself, was he not, Mike?
Yeah, I think you have a little more notes on this, but yeah, certainly.
Absolutely. And so what we did when we talk about Mr. Spock, and when we correlate that with dialectical behavioral therapy that we use here at Sinclair, what we talk about Miss Loren, we talk about an emotional mind. Okay, and we talk about a rational mind and the melding of those two. Mr. Spock often used the Vulcan mind meld on people to try to get into their minds. So when we deal with people with a strictly emotional mind, emotions are wonderful. They color our world. They're our rainbow. They're our internal barometer. They tell us how we feel. They show other people how we feel. We know how other people are feeling from their emotions. However, sometimes when we operate in strictly an emotional mind, Miss Loren, we tend to react rather than respond. We react rather than respond. I'm sure that you ever heard somebody, wearing your heart on your sleeve, those type of things. And then on the dialectical, in dialectical behavioral therapy, to the emotional mind would be a rational mind. And a rational mind would be where we do executive functioning. We need it to balance our checkbook. We need it to make logical decisions, to make our mind. However, when we operate, Mike, with strictly a logical mind, with strictly a rational mind, we can use this analogy. the three of us decide to feed all the starving children. We make a rational decision to feed the starving children. However, without placing in any emotion into a Miss Loren, we spend the next 6 months trying to decide whether to feed the boys first or the girls first. We can't come to that logical decision.
Right.
However, so what we do and what Mr. Spock struggled with during the show was what is the relation between reason and emotion, and we call that our wise mind, where we learn how to respond rather than react. And could you talk a little bit about what your recollections were, what you took away from Mr. Spock and his character?
Well, especially later on, he seemed to settle into a nice mix of the two. Allowing enough of his human side, and through the examples, through his compatriots of Captain Kirk and Bones, Dr. McCoy on the show, who are the most human and passionate of humans, I think, in their depictions on there. He became less robot as he went, because it was very McCoy called him a robot,
yes,
for the longest time, and cursed him several times over that, to the point where, and even he had to re-find himself after a certain point in the movies where he lost everything he had learned about humanity again. But actually kind of enjoy life. It was a big focal point, I think, of those later ones.
Absolutely. Have you ever met anybody who was, let's say, emotionally detached and would repress their emotions?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the way some men are, aren't they, Mike? They're emotionally constipated.
That's one way to put it, I guess. But yeah, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of the macho men that don't want to. Real men don't cry. I hear a lot, right? Yeah, certainly.
And I'm firmly convinced that's why women live longer than men. So when the guys get together and they play football or they play poker or they do things. Let's say I don't know about you, but normally when you're with the buddies and they're saying, if somebody would stop and say, "Oh, I feel so sad about today. Oh, she said this and I felt like crying." Mm-hmm. Probably is that they would not be inviting you back. They would not be inviting you for their next golf trip or for the next thing. So, however, the idea is that women tend to be more emotional and flexible. When you're with your friends, I would suspect that you share in your thoughts and feelings and your emotions more readily.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, it's great. So my suggestion is, Mike, if you want to see the tough guy stuff, go to the movies.
That's right. I saw a really good tough guy movie this weekend, actually.
Good deal. Great. However, as you noticed, as you alluded to, as the evolution of the Star Trek show went on, and as particularly the evolution of Mr. Spock, he began to meld those two, the emotional mind and the rational mind, into his character, and began to show a fusion and how those two minds can show some synchronicity, mm-hmm, where 1 + 1 can equal 3.
Right.
So what was some of your fondest memories of the Spock character?
Oh, jeez. Well, there's that long fight scene where... for me, I thought the most interesting movie, actually one where Leonard Nimoy directed, and it seems a little hokey right now because it was the environmental Earth Day, mm-hmm, kind of era, where, not that we're really away from that a lot now, where they had to save the whales. And there was, again, Spock had been reborn from death, and it was kind of figuring out who he was again. And it was a lot of fun to see, that kind of growth there and that kind of return to form for the character. Absolutely. And as that the show dealt with situations on terms way ahead of its time. They dealt with slavery, they dealt with warfare,
Mm-hmm.
they dealt with discrimination.
Right.
I particularly remember the one show where Frank Gorshin played the character where the person was black on one side and white on the other, and the other person was opposite, and they hated each other.
Yep.
And they wanted to kill each other.
Yep.
Simply because they couldn't see that they were the same. They were basically the same.
Mm-hmm.
And also, one of the things that I enjoyed so much about the Star Trek series, in particular Mr. Spock, and the Vulcan philosophy of IDIC, which is infinite diversity and infinite combination.
infinite diversity and infinite combination. And how prophetic that was dealing with the society today as in a short number of years, the Caucasian people are going to be in the minority in the United States. So, and again, here in the United States, we're truly going to have infinite diversity and infinite combination. And here at Sinclair, we celebrate diversity. We celebrate multiculturalism. We encourage people to be themselves. We encourage people to be proud of where they came from, be proud of their culture.
There's a reason why it's the melting pot in America.
Yes, yes. And sometimes it had melted a little less than others. However, today, you see people that perhaps don't have you see a lot of discrimination, you see a lot of bigotry, and underlying all that, Miss Lauren, is fear.
Yeah. Underlying
all that is fear.
Yep.
And fear was a subject that was dealt quite often with on Star Trek, and the way that we deal with it. The sensible, logical, mature way that we can deal with fear. And you ever hear anybody that was fearless? You ever meet anybody that was fearless or said they were fearless?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, people who are fearless, either they're incredibly insane, or let's say, and I don't like to use this word, but I'm going to say it, incredibly stupid. Okay. So, and you ever hear anybody that has a lot of courage?
Yeah.
Courage. And all courage is, Mike, is the ability to deal with fear.
Right.
And that's what we saw in the Star Trek. That's what we saw in the Spock character. We saw the courage to deal with fear. Spock had the courage to deal with these emotions, which in dialectical behavioral therapy and emotion regulation, where we ask people to learn how to identify and label emotions without responding to them.
If I can, Leonard Nimoy was very vocal on his Twitter for a while here in his last few years, and he passed on the 27th, and his last tweet actually was from the 23rd. And if anything, for some famous last words, is people calling this the best last tweet ever. And he says, quote, "A life is like a garden. Perfect moments can be had, but not preserved, except in memory. Live long and prosper."
Live long and prosper. And anything you'd like to add, Miss Lauren?
No, I think that quote pretty much sums it up. Live long and prosper from there. And
life is indeed like a garden, is it not, Mike?
Indeed.
And it's what we try to do here at Sinclair. We try to view everybody as that garden, as that plot of ground. However, what we try to do is help people, allow us to help you help yourself, and take that patch and take that garden and learn how to till it, and learn how to fertilize it, and learn how to give it the water, the sunshine, the love, and allow us to help you plant that seed in order to have a life. A life worth living, a life living out loud. Do you believe that Leonard Nimoy lived life out loud?
I think he definitely did. He's very vocal. He was very out there, and he did a lot of things that he was passionate about. And as we mentioned, some things that maybe other people didn't like on vinyl, But he still he got out there and he took risks, and he got to expand, a little bit. First, he was a little bit. He wrote, "I am not Spock." Trying to say, I am not this character that you all hold up to this pedestal. And then I actually read later the book I Am Spock, where he started embracing that a bit.
Yes.
But he took that and got to use it as a bigger platform for so many things that he was passionate about, and got to really kind of live out a lot.
Well, when the show first came out, Mike, what they referred to it as, rather than a soap opera, was a space opera.
Yes.
However, there was much more deeper meaning underneath that, and I know that Gene Roddenberry, the executive producer, the writer of the show, who came up with the idea, had to fight when they had the first interracial kiss on the show.
And very interesting, because a lot of that played out. I'm hearing stories again, over the last few days about the passing about. Supposedly that played Lieutenant Uhura wasn't getting paid as much a scale as everybody else, because she's a black woman in Hollywood in the late 60s, right? And Leonard Nimoy apparently is one that stepped up and said, not a big actor by any means at that point, but stepped up and kind of stuck up for her and got her, a better pay scale.
And that says a lot about the man.
Definitely.
That says a lot about his character and his personality when you treat everybody that you meet with courtesy and respect. Mm-hmm. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. Well, obviously, Mike, the show had a lot of cultural and social impact, as there has been 5 successful series and 12 movies associated with the Star Trek franchise.
Yep, and still going.
and still going, and still going. And I know that some of the younger folks out today have been reintroduced to the Star Trek character, to Captain Kirk, to Bones, to Scotty. And
and I think it's all available on Netflix if you want to go look. Even the funky cartoon that they had for a while that still has everybody's voices. I love that thing.
And we hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. And should you have any questions or concerns about this, you can please contact us. And what we'll do is we could...
if you want to continue the conversation, if you have any memories about Star Trek and what it meant for you, maybe things you learned growing up, any influence it had, or Leonard Nimoy in particular, you can continue the conversation with us on Facebook, Google+, and on Twitter at Seclara Life there. And keep an eye out for these and other recordings here in the future on our YouTube channel. And please also subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, so you can listen to us and past conversations we've had on this channel, anytime you want. And also, please visit Seclara.com for more about what we do here at this practice, and of course, read the great blog where we got a lot of information, including these shows.
And as always, at the end, Miss Loren, we offer a free prescription. We offer everyone fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Perhaps unplug your television, take up fishing, and for a truly mindful experience, we suggest that you fish without bait. So until the next time, live long and prosper.